Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ryuga here with another video. This time we're going to be doing something slightly different. We're going to be discussing killer perks, especially ones that I believe are in a slightly weaker spot that could use a little bit of tweaking to make them better in the current meta, and especially more useful at rank 1. That way you can see a lot more perk variety at rank 1 instead of just the same perks, whether it's Enduring, Ruin, Pop Goes the Weasel, all that jazz. Maybe if we buff all these other perks, you'll see them a lot more. So, how we have this set up is we have a list of perks, we have the pros of the perks, we have the cons of the perks, we have how to fix, and then other comments. So we're going to go through all of these perks that I listed. Just assume that if a perk is not listed, that I would do no change to them. So before we get started as well, let it be noted that these changes are meant to make these perks strong for a reason. I think that in both scenarios, Killer and Survivor, they should all have strong perks. The reason that perks should be strong is that you want to see variety. You want to see a lot of variety. I think that it's important to make strong perks because if they're not strong, you're not going to see a lot of variety, for different killers. You're just going to see the same shit over and over and over. So keep this in mind and keep an open mind while you are listening to these changes. I'm also going to have the perk descriptions up on the screen while I am talking about the perks. That way you guys can read them if you don't already know what they do. Without further ado, let's just jump into the perks that we will be changing. The first one on the list is Bitter Murmur. The pros of Bitter Murmur: it's good on Huntresses for sniping and can be semi-useful on the last generator completion, giving a lot of aura information and tracking at the end of the game. Cons: it only affects the single completed generator during the middle of the trial. So how would you fix this perk? Rework the perk to show the aura of all survivors after a generator is completed. In my opinion, it is way too low usage of a perk, and the aura reading needs to be a lot stronger to make it viable and get the usage of this perk up. If it only activates once per generator, which is only 5 times per game, you need to make it relatively strong in order to make it appealing to red rank killers, or else the perk is just not going to be used. The next perk we're going to be talking about is Blood Echo. The pros of Blood Echo: it's good on killers who can snowball damage, such as Hag, Huntress, Deathslinger, Plague, and Legion. However, the cons include that the hemorrhage status effect is relatively useless. So in order to fix this perk, you would cause Blood Echo to also give the Mangled status effect. The other comments include, to make it a higher use on some of these killers, adding the Mangled status effect can make it far more appealing, making healing take a lot longer for those who haven't healed yet. Overall, this might make it a lot more appealing on other killers who don't necessarily focus on keeping everybody injured all the time. That way it can at least provide some kind of momentary pressure when people have to heal off the Mangled status effect. The next perk we're going to be jumping into is Blood Warden. The pros of Blood Warden include, it can be very useful in endgame and be a surprise factor. Cons: it requires an endgame hook as well as the doors to be opened. How would we fix this? We would add the addition, Blood Warden can now activate if the killer manually opens the exit gate. So what this means is as soon as the killer opens the exit gate, Blood Warden activates. My other comments include, Blood Warden can be useless against survivors who 99 the gates. Buffing it to activate upon the killer opening the exit gate could make it more viable in the late game, as well as give more interaction on the killer's side. Because survivors can 99 the gate, a lot of the time you possibly won't get use out of Blood Warden. So I feel like adding this small interaction will make it a lot more useful, and you might actually see a lot more usage in red ranks. The next perk that I want to look at is Bloodhound. The pros for Bloodhound include, it is good for players who are not adept at tracking blood and can be good on killers that have a lot of people injured during the match. The cons, though, is that overall to good players it has really no use. It's pretty much unseen at red ranks or higher tier gameplay. How would I fix this perk? When 2 blood pools overlap, so in other words, when a survivor is standing in one place, likely healing or on a generator, the aura of the survivor is revealed until the overlapping blood despawns. My other comments include, not only will this now be a very strong aura reading perk, it might be useful enough to make it into a lot of upper tier players' builds. The reason it's not used that much is because tracking blood is relatively easy, so why would you waste a perk slot just to make blood brighter? I think when you're using an entire perk slot, you need to be useful, and if perks aren't useful, you're not going to see a lot of them used in upper tier gameplay. So you need to have some strong effect, so I think this overlapping effect would be really cool. The next perk on the list is Choleraphobia. The pros: it can tremendously slow healing against killers with large tear radiuses. The cons of the perk: killers with small tear radius or that have a lullaby do not benefit from this perk. How would I fix this? Well, now Choleraphobia is also applied inside of a killer's lullaby. My other comments include, the tooltip of the perk mentions that your presence instills great fear. Now, if this were true, it would also apply to lullabies. This wouldn't make the perk meta, but it might make it useful on killers like Huntress and Freddy, who have a very tiny tear radius but have, a relatively big lullaby. The next perk on the list is Cruel Limits. The pros of Cruel Limits: this perk can give you advantages in certain situations, especially with killers that can one-shot, such as Leatherface, Hillbilly, and Myers. Cons: the range is far too short to be effective, making this perk widely unused. How would I fix it? Cruel Limits now blocks vaults within 40 meters instead of 24. My other comments on this: a perk that can be used only 5 times per game needs to have a somewhat strong and lingering effect. The large range will make it very useful and even crippling on smaller maps for survivors. The next perk on the list is Huntress's Lullaby. The pros of Huntress's Lullaby is that the perk can be funny and cause severe regression to a gen if it's up for too long, and also can make healing skill checks difficult. The cons: a survivor knows about the totem before it even has a single stack. How would I fix this perk? Huntress's Lullaby totem does not become lit until at least one survivor has been hooked. Survivors do not get a Hex notification on their screen until they miss at least one skill check while affected by Lullaby. My other comments on this is that Lullaby is bad because it can be cleansed fast, and survivors know about it from the start, making it not light up until it's being used, and also not notifying a survivor until there's a significant enough effect that they miss a skill check would make it stand out a lot more for upper tier killers. The regression could even be better than Old Ruin if these changes go through. The next perk on the list is Hex Ruin. Pros of Hex Ruin include pushing survivors off generators can cause huge disruption to the match, especially paired with surveillance. You can keep gens low progress. Cons: survivors frequently spawn near your totem or it's in a very bad spot, easily cleansable. How would I fix this? When Ruin is cleansed, the effect persists only to generators that are physically kicked by the killer. However, when the Ruin is cleansed, the regression speed is reduced from 200% to 100%. That way kicking a gen does not become too powerful. Comments: I feel like Hex Totems frequently can be a waste of a perk slot and should have lingering effects. This would make people less scared to run Ruin and fear that it would be cleansed. Iron Maiden is the next perk we will be discussing. The pros is that this perk is good on chainsaw killers or on Nurse and Huntress because survivors may juke into a locker or away from a Nurse Blink. It also counters people hiding from barbecue and chili. Cons: the exposed status effect doesn't last long enough to be useful, and overall this perk doesn't provide much utility for most killers. Fix: Iron Maiden now is an aura reading perk as well. It grants the abilities to read the aura of survivors even when they are in lockers. In addition to this, a survivor who enters a locker has their aura revealed to the killer while they are inside, and upon leaving they scream and become exposed. The exposed status effect now lasts for 30 seconds. My other comments on this perk: this perk's utility sucks. Giving it aura reading as well as a severe exposed effect can make it far more useful for many killers instead of only a select few, as well as making lockers far more deadly instead of making it just a meme for survivors to hop in and out of lockers and just scream from across the map. The next perk on the list is Insidious. The pros of Insidious is that it can be useful for hiding your presence in areas you're trying to protect, being able to catch a survivor off guard. The cons include that many killers use this perk to skilllessly face camp, and overall this perk has very shitty utility. How would I fix this? You now have an extra active ability as killer. Upon pressing the button, you become undetectable for 5 seconds. This has a 30-second cooldown. My other comments on this: Insidious really has no use in Dead by Daylight gameplay other than to be a dick. Making it unique in such a way may encourage players to use it. Being able to actively hide your red stain and tear radius for a few seconds could be huge in certain loops or sneaking up on survivors. The next perk on the list is Mindbreaker. The pros of Mindbreaker include that it can nullify Sprint Burst and make it difficult for survivors working on gens to make use of their exhaustion perks. However, the cons is that the exhaustion lasts for too little, and the below 50% on the generator is kind of terrible. How would I fix this? While repairing a generator, regardless of progress, survivors become exhausted for 10 seconds. My other comments is that you just need to make this perk actually useful. I mean, below 50% really isn't going to do anything, and the exhaustion doesn't even last long enough to do anything. You just need to make it last the entire time of the gen and make the exhaustion longer. That way a survivor can't just stand there and it just disappears in 3 seconds. That's just ridiculous in my opinion. I don't even know why it's a perk. The next perk that we're going to be changing on the list is Monstrous Shrine. The pros of Monstrous Shrine include getting hooks in the basement can severely cripple the team, especially if it's a basement centralized in the middle. The cons, however, is that too many maps have basements that you don't get to make use out of, making this perk extremely unused. How would I fix this? Hooking a survivor on any hook in the map instantly teleports them to the basement hook. While you are using this perk, the entity blocks the killer from entering the basement. Any survivor, besides the one on the hook that stays in the basement for too long, will instantly be hooked in the basement by the entity. What are my other comments on this? The perk is widely unused. Adding effects like this makes it very appealing. You have to add something to keep the killer from entering the basement while using the perk so they can't hold people hostage, as well as making it to where survivors can't hide in the basement since the killer is also blocked from entering by the entity. In theory, this sounds fun, however, executing it is another story, but it's still something that I think would be fun and I would love to see in the game. The next perk we'll be talking about is Remember Me. The pros of Remember Me include that it is very useful in-game, especially if the obsession is dead. Cons, there's no way of knowing which gate the survivor is on, sometimes giving them still ample time to open, and it's also hard to defend against multiple survivors on the exit gates. How would I fix this perk? You would make it to where when an exit gate is touched, you get a noise notification at that gate. Survivors also face skill checks when opening the exit gate. What are my comments on this? This perk isn't seen that often, and if the obsession is still alive, they can open the door pretty fast. Adding the noise notification is just quality of life. I would say add door regression as well, but that may be too strong. Maybe save this for another perk or a new perk as well. The next perk we're going to be talking about is Thrilling Tremors. The pros include that it gives useful information about generators that are being worked on by survivors and can sometimes be used to strategically block generators in certain scenarios. Cons, the cooldown is far too long for a perk like this. How would I fix it? Just reduce the cooldown by 20 seconds. So it would become 40 seconds cooldown. My comments on this is that if a survivor goes down, they should suffer the consequences. Having a huge cooldown on a perk like this doesn't really make that much sense to me. The next perk we're going to be talking about is Tinkerer. The pros of this perk include that removing the killer's tear radius mid-chase can be relatively useful. It can also be used to sneak up on people working on gens. Cons, the duration is far too short and activates far too late to be useful. How would I fix this? Tinkerer now activates when the gen reaches 75%, and any repair progress beyond 75% is reduced by 10%. My comments include, to get full use out of a perk like Tinkerer, you will have to give the killer the opportunity to at least reach the generator. Reducing the percent at which it activates as well as slowing down the last quarter of the gen could make it extremely useful, if not for the Oblivious status effect, or at least slowing down the gen. The next perk we're going to be discussing is Unrelenting. What are the pros? I'm sorry, but there are literally no pros to Unrelenting. Cons? Literally the entire perk. How would I fix this? Increase the missed attack recovery to 60%. If you're going to dedicate an entire perk slot to a missed attack, you need to reduce the recovery by a lot. The next perk we're going to be discussing is Discordance. The pros include that it detects multiple survivors on a gen, in which spreading them apart and getting them off the gen can be crucial at certain parts of the trial. Cons? Perk at level 3 is worse than at level 1. How would we fix this? Swap the level 3 and level 1 notification sound intervals. Level 3 should give more information than level 1. The more frequent the notifications, the more useful the information. The next perk we will be discussing is Fire Up. The pros of Fire Up include that as the game progresses, your action speeds become more and more quick. The cons, however, include that it does not provide a lot of net benefit in terms of utility. How would I fix this? Fire Up now gives an 8% bonus per stack instead of 4%, and in addition, it now gives a 1% increased base movement speed to the killer per token, meaning that when all 5 generators are completed, 115 killers will now move at 120, and 110 will move at 115. The next perk we're going to be talking about is Hex Roll of the Hunt. The pros of this perk is that it can be useful in slowing down survivor cleanse speed and wasting their time. It also lets you defend precious hex totems. The cons is that it only notifies you about hex totems. How would I fix this? Make it to where it gives you a notification on any totem, regardless of whether it's a hex or not. The other comments that I have on this is that a hex needs to be powerful, so realistically it should give notifications for all totems worked on and not just hex totems. The next perk we're going to be discussing is I'm All Ears. The pros of this perk is that it can be used to predict a survivor's movement in a chase after a vault, extremely useful at LT walls and some jungle gym walls. The cons is that the cooldown is too long. How would I fix this? Reduce the cooldown from 40 seconds to 25 seconds. My other comments on this is that a perk focused around vault shouldn't be hindered by such a strong cooldown. Reducing the cooldown would effectively make it much stronger. Overwhelming Presence is the next perk we will be discussing. The pros: being able to nuke a survivor's item charge can be useful depending on the items. The cons, however, depending on the items, the charges might not matter, or they may frequently be using their items outside of your tear radius, anyways making this perk not that useful. How would I change it personally? I think that instead of eating charges, the perk should disable survivors' items while they are in your tear radius. My other comments on this is that it will make it to where survivors cannot flashlight you, cannot use keys, and cannot use their toolboxes when you are getting close to them, possibly making this perk see more use, as consumption rate, in my opinion, is trash. The next perk we're going to be discussing is Predator. Pros: it can be useful for people who are not very keen on tracking scratch marks. Cons: it's not very useful in high-level gameplay. How would I fix this perk? Predator now causes survivors who are walking to leave scratch marks. My other comments on this is that Predator just seems so useless, so adding more utility that may be being useful to higher levels of gameplay could make it far more used. The final perk we're going to be discussing is Surge. The pros of Surge include that it can be useful for blowing up gens you're not near when you down a survivor. The cons is that the cooldown is quite long and the range is not that effective. How would I fix this? Buff the perk by increasing the distance to 40 meters. The gens will explode, as well as reducing the cooldown to 25 seconds. The other comments on this is that Surge is almost in a good spot. These changes to the perk will make it see a lot more use. Hopefully I brought some interesting information to the table in terms of how perks could be changed to be seen more use in high tier gameplay. Let me know what you guys think, or if you have some of your own ideas, please feel free to share them down in the comments. I would love to read them. Other than that, hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you're new to the channel, feel free to subscribe, turn on notifications, join the Discord as well. If you guys would like to see another video for the Survivor perks, please let me know as well. Other than that, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, night, evening, morning, whatever time it is, wherever you guys live, and I will see you guys in the fog. Peace. Appreciate you guys watching.
There was thunder and lightning. It was awfully exciting, but your words are so frightening, and my fists are now done.